Okay, we're not ready to get started. Hi, Adrian.
It's not, I can't see it to do that.
This is on your second screen. So you have to come up like this and over to the side. So if you take your mouse off the screen here, it goes to that one.
Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. And first, welcome everyone that is here. Appreciate you being here to learn more about the bond. And hopefully this will be a time that you can ask questions. We have our architect team here that is also come. We have construction team that is here. So hopefully that with some of the questions that we'll have that too for you. So we just appreciate you taking time out of your evening and sacrificing some of those football games. So thank you for that. So this did not start just in August when you probably started hearing about everything. We actually started this quite a while ago. We had a plan way back in April of 2020, and it even started before that. I had one of the construction manager that was a friend, and I said, you know, I think our buildings need some work, and could you just kind of come and take a tour and look through our buildings and find out what we might need. And with that, from that point, he walked through the buildings with me, and he said, you know, what you really need to do is you need to do a formal proposal where you can get information and have the team really do a deep facility study. So we went ahead and started doing an RFP, which is a proposal for to do the project. And from that, we ended up with two teams that worked together that really did an in-depth meeting for us. So we had, from that meeting, we did educational studies and surveys with our staff. We had input from community people. We had several meetings that started over a year ago that we gained all the information to lead us to where we are today. We had part of the teams, we looked at long-term range of what they wanted in the facilities. We set goals, and now we're at a point that we've been informing people. So we are here to help you know more about this project. The two teams that we ended up getting were Carl A. Nelson and CMBA. And one of the parts of the project that we wanted is we wanted it to be a combined. So it wasn't just the architect team that was looking at it, but it was also the construction managers. So with both of those, we found the teams that had such experience in education. So if you look at the stats on these two teams together, CMBA has completed 90+ projects, and 70% of those are ones that are in the educational area. Carl A. Nelson is out of Burlington, and they have done many projects within our area around here. Not only did they help on our high school project that we had, they also worked on our hospital when we had that one, and they have done, they did our rec center, and they've done Van Buren projects and Pekin projects from around us. So lots of schools. From all of our meetings, one of the things that we kept hearing over and over is that we don't want you just to do a project that is just today. and then not know what's the next plan. We would like it to be a project that has longevity with it. We want something that's like a 20, 40-year plan. So we really worked hard to make sure that we had something set up so it would be a plan over time that we could look at. The other things that we heard is that we wanted to have a facility that is really for our students today and for our students tomorrow. We want to make sure that the plan is something of the 21st century, so it's flexible and the kids can have the environment that they need to have their education in. We also heard that we want to make sure that everything that we are doing has efficiency in our project. So we didn't want to have frivolous things. We wanted to make sure that what we were doing was planning for the future, planning for efficiency, and that we can plan for a stable environment. Questions that have come up is like, well, what about the enrollment? Where are we at on that? And part of what I went today to our data specialist and I said, so where are we at today? Now it's not official or anything like that, but it's just how are we faring? And we're about 6 kids up from where we ended last year, which again, nothing is set yet. We won't put anything in stone, but it's at least showing you that things are on the stable side. And that's where we have been. I said, over time, we've just been a little bit on the stable side. There's been a decline, but we are seeing a stability in our enrollment. The other thing that we wanted to do is make sure that we had a financial roadmap. We wanted to set this so that we were not taxing the taxpayers. We wanted to make sure that we were doing something that we thought we could afford. We didn't want to be extravagant. We just wanted to make sure that we were being solid and stable as we looked for this project. So part of what we heard from all of our different people, we have put in a study. So we have a facility assessment report, and you can take a picture of this QR code, or you can go to our website, and it's on the brochure. So you have the brochure, you can find this too, take a picture of this, and you can go to the website and find out even more and look at this study in depth. From this report, this facility assessment gave us part of the eye on the middle school. And with the eye on the middle school, we really looked at what were some of the things that we needed to fix within this building, around this building, that put this building at the top of needing the most attention. And they looked through every one of our buildings. And what we had found out with this building is that it's a very tired building. It's structurally safe for everyone, yet there is the envelope around it to fix things. At the last meeting, they were saying to fix the outside of the building alone is about $6 million. And that doesn't put anything in fixing things that are for the kids. So if we want to fix the roof for the tiles around the outside, the drain tiles, fix some of the water damage, that's what that would cost. And then we looked at different places within the building that we have a lot of structural things. We have windows that are single pane that cause more condensation. We have water damage that is coming from the ground in. We have water damage from the roof. So it just has a lot of water infiltration issues within the building. And we have it set that we can go and show you a couple of rooms when we're done here tonight. We heard from our people that we had come in. We had different focus groups throughout the time, and they want to make sure that whatever we do, we have a supportive environment for our students, and the culture is there that's going to have a conducive learning environment for the kids. We want to make sure that the kids have that ability to have relationships with older students and younger students. We want to make sure that our children, you're letting people in? That's what you're doing, okay. We want to make sure that we have a setting up so that our students can model for our younger kids and they can be mentors for others too. So we want it to be a place that is inviting for all of the kids in a learning space. One of the things that our teacher said is that we want a space that if we had all the things that we could want in the world, we want our kids band together developmentally. We really want our 5th graders back with our 4th and our 3rd graders. We want our 2nd graders with our kindergarten and our 1st graders. So in order to do that, we needed to come up with a different type of a plan that we could put all of the kids together in a setting. And so grade spans together, putting those in the developmentally based band so that they can have that learning environment conducive to what we want for our kids today. We also heard from our teachers that hands-on learning is very important, and having the flexibility in moving things around for the classrooms, that they could have the kids in smaller groups and larger groups, that if they have learning teams that they want, they can bring different grades together and put them together to learn a certain skill set. They need that flexibility. If we have the environment, like right now we have a bubble that is in our 2nd grade group that we have more children in that group. We have expanded our kindergarten and 1st. We've had to add classes for those. So when we have bubbles, one of the things that we can find out sometimes that happens is that it will, we have to figure out where that room will be. We have to have a teacher that will come to that building. It can cause some disruptions. However, if we had a space that there is this flowing of students, then that disruption won't be as much. They can have a bubble grade. A teacher can either move with the students. They could have that easily change that space for the students and make it less disruption for everyone, and work with our environment of enrollment with students. The other thing we heard from our community is that we are a welcoming community. We like people to be in our buildings. We like people to see what we have. And they want to have a place that they're extremely proud of, that when they bring employers in, that one of the things people want to see is their schools. And that's one of the factors on sometimes if companies will come to you, if they will be here and have their business set up, is if the schools and what they look like, because they know they're going to be bringing employers in here, and they know that if they have a place that the schools are looking at a certain way, then that is definitely something that can help with inviting people and having a company here. So the economy part of that is extremely important, to have buildings where the people want to bring people in. And the more people that we would get to our area, then that also helps on that tax base. So there's some good things of having more people that would come into our group. The other thing is we heard is that we want our buildings to be modernized. We don't want them to be these older, tired buildings. We want our students to have things that they can have an environment where learning is conducive to what they need today. And we want to make sure that that environment is good. There are studies out there that talk about how if you have an environment that is the fresher environment, the newer buildings with the proper lighting, with the proper facility, that it does make a difference in their academics. So those are things that are out there that, that do help our kids in the long run on their studies. So we also did a master planning, and within this report, it shows the 4 buildings that we have. And it will show you in this, when you go to this site, that the middle school is the one that has urgent needs to be addressed on fixing everything. So again, it goes back to, there's a lot of work that we need to do in this building if we were going to renovate it. We'd still have an old building afterwards and not helping our students on that academic side of things. It also shows that Pence, which is older than this building, is actually in better physical condition than this building, possibly because of some of the work that we have done on that building. They have new lighting, they have a new gym floor, they've changed some of their lockers. So that building is better structural than this one in what we need in order for the next building to address. We also looked at the size of the land around it. We looked at where do we, where could we build and what would be the space for that. And so part of that is this, there's a lot of land here. And with that part of it, we have room to expand and to grow on our middle school site. Do that every time. The other part that we have learning, it goes back to that learning environment for our kids. is that education always follows behind it is whatever industrial revolution that we are in. We just went through the computer one. And if you think about how kids have been learning in school and how businesses have been running, we use those computers as a tool. And now we're entering a phase where the computers are actually part of your business world. They're part of how you have meetings and conduct things. It's how you connect to different people. So we're in an industrial revolution of connectivity right now. And you can see that. For example, even here, we have people from home that are Zooming in to watch this meeting. So if they didn't feel comfortable coming or couldn't get here, they could watch it through a Zoom. We have meetings that are happening. I was having a meeting this afternoon on a Zoom meeting. So that connectivity is definitely something that we're in the middle of now. We want to make sure that we have the environment, the space, and the way that we can teach our kids with that capability. The other part to look at, that whole part of the Industrial Revolution, is to look at how things have changed from the agricultural, and the manufacturing is getting smaller over time. The trades are getting bigger, and we want to make sure that we are setting our kids up for success, whatever they do after high school, that they have the skills to do that. And many times it's the environment that you have that can help you with those areas. So how do we get to where we need to be, knowing that this is a tired building, knowing that this is the one that needs to have a lot of things fixed in it, and then to move forward? So our existing site, middle school site, we have the building here. We have plenty of land. We have land that goes out front. We have land that's in the back. We have a nice piece of land here. One of the things that we would need to do is to move our tennis courts, and the relocating the tennis courts is within the bond. And to do that, we do not have the space yet selected of where that will be, but we've been meeting. I've met with the city manager, engineer, and mayor, and the Parks and Recs, and we're trying to find a place for that tennis court that would meet all of our needs. And we do not have that selected yet, so that's still happening. When the bond passes, that'll be one of the first things that we look at, because we would like to have the tennis courts up and going so that we could then have that set for the kids to play on and for the community. And then from there, we would put the building and start construction for the building. Then what we would do after we move the tennis courts is we would add the 4th grade through 8th grade into this space. So part of that is neighborhoods. And the 4th and 5th grade would be on one side, the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade would be on the other side. They would have their own ways of entering. They would have their own park, pick up and drop off place. Someone said after the last meeting, hey, we might be able to move the hub from the high school over to the middle school, because we could drop off those kids and have a very efficient place here for that pickup and drop off. So those are some things of that efficiency that could help on that side of it, and make this environment for the kids. We have common spaces that we would share with the students as they would be using this space. Once this space is up and built, then we would take the other building down, and we would prime that land so that it is ready for the next bond, which would be in like 20 years from now. And that one would add on to this current space. So at the end of this bond would be where the funding from this current bond would be, the 34 million. So we would have a new building. We would have the tennis courts relocated. And one of the things that we did put into this bond was air conditioning for our high school gym. And that is the only place in our whole facilities that is not air conditioned. And I don't know if you've been to graduations there, or if you have kids that are playing volleyball, or if you've been to any of the events through the spring or the fall. It gets pretty hot in that gym. We had the Meet the Trojans the other night, and everybody was kind of fanning, and I gave a little bit of, hey, come to one of our meetings and learn about the bond, and they were all fanning. And I said, and oh, by the way, air conditioning in this gym is one of the things that is on it. And it does seem like something that we would like to do. We did not have enough money in the last bond to put that on there. So we do have it in this bond so that we could have air conditioning in the high school gym. So the future for the next bond. So this is part of this longevity plan that is from not just from today and this current bond, but then the next bond that would be 20 years out would be to add the kindergarten through 3rd grade to this bond. And then we would have a whole facility, a K-8 facility on one side. We would have this space so that the efficiencies of sharing common grounds would be there also. So it would look, this is definitely not what it would look like today, but it would look something like this for the future, where you would have the current and then the proposed part with the parking all around it and the space. So that's the 20 to 40 year plan. We wanted to make sure when we looked at our plan that we watched our tax levy. I don't know if you've looked at your tax levy, but the school line, if you go home and you find your taxes and you find the school line, you will see that it dropped, and it dropped significantly. And it will still stay low next year. And that's because we paid a bond off early. And we paid it off so fast that we didn't get anything else in to fill that. So what we are asking is that we go back to where we were in 2019 on your taxes. This is something that we would fill that in. We are still, if you look at this slide, we are the orange line on the slide. So with the orange line, that's Fairfield. That's been your taxes since 2003. So you can see where it's going down. The dotted line are all of the schools around us and where they are on that average. And then the little tiny light gray ones are what those are, the different districts around us. The black line, the dark black line, that is our state average. And you can see Fairfield has been right in the middle all this time. This is another way to look at it. Currently, right now, Fairfield is at 1182. That's where our taxes are this year. That's where they will be next year. And what we are asking is to go to that 1333. That's what it was in 2019. We're asking to go back to that costing. And that's still below the state average of 1428. So think that, you know, what we are asking for, a new building, a new facility for our students so that they have the academic environment, and we're still below the state average. And if you look around, we've had currently today, Washington also is asking for a new bond. They have one out there. Keokuk has a new bond that's going on out there. Cardinal had one that just passed in March. Ottumwa had one that passed in March. So we're not asking for things that others around us haven't had. Then if you look at your assessed value of your home and go to our webpage, you can find out what it would cost you for a month and what it would cost you for the year to have this new facility plus the tennis courts and the high school air conditioning. So if you have a house that's assessed at 100,000, it would be $649 a month. And that's assessed is what it is on your taxes. It is not what you would pay for it if somebody would come and buy your home, but what is assessed at. And the same for the ag land is 12 cents a month for $1,000 of acre. So this is important to see where it is, go to that site, put in what your information, your personal information on the site, and then you can find that out exactly what it would do for your taxes and where it would be. And again, I've got to talk about what we did with our last bond. So our last bond, we are one of the places, Fairfield, that when I go to financial meetings with other school districts, they'll say, well, if you want to do something that can really help your community, here's what Fairfield did. They pull up our last bond, they talk about it with everyone, and I always wait for it in a meeting because I always know that they're going to talk about Fairfield. So we paid off that last bond 11 years early. And then with that, we were able to save our taxpayers $1.55 million just in that alone by paying it off early. If we wouldn't have paid it off early, we wouldn't even be able to talk about fixing this tired old building. We would have to wait another 10 years. We'd have to still be putting our money that we have from our save and our other tax money into fixing this building and keeping it up and running. But because we paid that off early, we have an opportunity that we can provide environment, a fresh environment for the kids today and for their future, because we've been such good stewards of taxpayers' money and paid that off early. So when the bond passes on September 14th, which isn't very far away, and do you know that it's open right now? You can go vote. So early voting has already started. You can go to the courthouse and you can vote. I know people have done that. They said it's pretty simple. You can go in and you have to fill out the paper like in early voting and just go right in and vote. It's the only thing that is on the ballot is this question for the bond. So today there wasn't any waiting when somebody said they went over and voted. So this would be a great time to do it before the 14th if you would like to vote early. Then we would start the design and construction. We would get people in the community involved. We would get input of what they wanted. One of the things that when we were first talking about this, our food service person said, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. This would be really great if we could have one great big kitchen, and I want the kitchen to be like this, and I want to have this window, and I want to do this, and I want this in there. It's whoa, whoa, whoa. We're not there yet. What we're doing right now is we just need to get to the point that we can build it, and then we can start dreaming, and we can look at what you want in that kitchen and get things ready and have the efficiency. So she was looking at what kind of equipment that would help be more efficient for serving our kids. So all of that would come in that design and construction stage, and we would look at those things. Then we would start the construction for that building and have that completed by 2024 in July. And we would have our kids ready to move in of July of 2024. And after that, we'd have the kids in the building. We would start the demolition of this building so that it isn't making a difference for the kids in their learning. Many people have asked, why now? Why would we want to go now? Why don't we just wait? We could wait that 10 years, and that was what the plan was originally. Well, we know that construction prices are going to be going up. We know that interest rate right now, I did ask our financial advisor, if we would secure this bond today, what would our interest rate be? And he had it in capital letters. He said today, it may change in the future. It might change when you actually have to put that bond in, but it was 1.82. Now our last bond was 3%. So gosh, what a great way of saving. So remember, we saved 1.55 million in interest rate on the last one with the taxes. This is even helping on that part just by having the bond now and not in the future. And then when you talk about the construction cost and inflation, if we waited, then you have an extra cost that it would be there, that 3% increase. We are well positioned financially to have this bond and to do this. The financial advisor had also said, are you sure you just want 34 million? You know, you could go to 37.5 if you would like in your bond. And I said, you know, really what we want is we want to make sure that we can tell our taxpayers we want it to go back to where it was in 2019. We don't want to increase it. We want to stay within our means. We want to be frugal with what we are doing. We want to make sure that we're not doing a lot of extra things. We want to make sure that we are being respectful of our taxpayers' money. So we are well positioned to have this type of a bond. We do need to address the needs of our students. We want to make sure that our kids have what they need for the future and for tomorrow. We want to make sure that they have the academics set. So for our kids today that'll be coming into this building in a couple of years, we want to make sure that we have that facility. This is something that as we look at this plan, it is something that it will be our children that are here today, their grandchildren will be looking at these bonds in the next stages of what we are doing. We want to make sure that we're being very flexible with our enrollment and with our operational costs. One of the things that I can show you is that this was an old slide that we had from a presentation from one of our studies of our focus groups. All of our buildings are coming to about the end of their life. And so we are taking a lot of our operational costs, a lot of our management work that we have to do with our people to make sure that we are fixing the buildings and that we're putting new roofs on things and that we are making sure that every building is ready and set for our kids. When we've gone through the tours, you can tell we are taking care of the buildings. We're fixing things when they are to the point, if it's something that needs to be fixed. We're putting the new tiles down on the floor when the water has come up and popped them off. We're replacing those. We're making sure that it is set for the kids and safe for them to be in the buildings. But if we're doing that in all 4 buildings, it takes a tax on our people that are doing that work. It also takes a financial task on as we're trying to make sure that we have the money to fix everything. Since 2014, this building alone, I had one of our people pull a report on our roof projects for here. And just over the last 5 years, $351,458 from one company alone is what we have spent just trying to keep this roof from leaking. And that's just the roof. That's not the sides. That's not the other parts of it. The rest of this stack is a lot of the maintenance work that we have done on this building to make sure that we are keeping everything up and running so that it is safe for the kids and that it looks as good as it looks today. There's a lot of pride that goes into this building to make sure that we are keeping it for our kids for today. So if we had this plan of this 20 to 40-year plan that we can put out there, we can get this part of the building first, get it fixed, then we would be able to spend, rather than 4 buildings to divide our time by, it would be 3, and we can be fixing those buildings. And then in 20 years, build the next building, and then we would have a better rotation. So we have, we're off, this is part of the reason for this bond. Cost efficiency. When you think about that, we get to reuse this land. So the land, we already have purchased it, it's here, it's ours. So we can pour that money back into the building and make sure that we're having it set for our students. It minimizes those operational costs that I was just talking about. We can reuse our geothermal field that is here. So that will help on efficiency. We can continue to use our athletic fields and have a new tennis court. Our tennis court, we have to fix it anyway. The tennis court is one that we have with our shared responsibility with the city. And half the time it's like, we have the money to do our half and the city doesn't have their money. The city will have their money for their half and the school doesn't have their money. So it's at a point where we need to fix it. And it's going to cost about $500,000 just to resurface it. So it's time that it's a perfect time rather than to resurface it to then go ahead and move it to a new place, make sure that we have that ready to go. And then again, we talked about the high school air conditioning to have that part of it. And then I'm going to tell you to make sure you go to our website and really go in depth. There's questions there. You can see what other people in the community. We had a lot of different focus groups. Every time we'd have those, we would write down all the questions. We would get those going. We would take it to the team that's over here. We would say, hey, this is one of the questions that have come up. Let's look at that and make sure we've vetted every answer so that we would have it. And then we've placed those on the website. So you have questions that are there that you can go to if and we've tried to make sure that we have that. It talks about a lot of the same things that are in this presentation are on that website. So do go to that. You just need to go to our website. It's fairfieldfuture.org, and you can get to this bond site and look at more of that information. So that is everything that I have. So if you have questions for me, if you have questions for our team of architects or construction managers, we're ready to go. If you need them written down, you don't want to ask out front, we've got paper pencil that you can ask questions that way. And I do know that we have people on there. So do we have any questions?
The geothermal field now, it's my understanding, has not
It has not what?
been working.
Okay. So the geothermal field has not been working well in this building. We have some of the HVAC parts that we have been working on that within the system of it, not necessarily the field. And I may go to Jordan. Do you know more about our geothermal field?
I don't know much about the issues.
And you know what, we're gonna, so that people can hear online, even though there's not very many people here, we're using the microphone so that they can hear it. I'm gonna have you come up here.
I'm actually not certain what the issues are with the geothermal system. It hasn't been very efficient. I actually don't know much on that, but I mean, generally your geothermal systems are the most efficient system that you can get within HVAC systems in general, much more efficient than direct fired RTU systems or anything like that. But I personally don't know what the issues have been with the efficiencies, I guess.
And I'm gonna have you say that again because I wanna make sure that we repeat the question.
I guess positive impact. Primarily because of the efficiency of the board. Improved with infrastructure.
So the question, or I guess the statement was that it's your understanding that the geothermal system didn't provide the efficiency that you thought, or that the public thought it was going to bring within this particular building, or all the buildings in general? This particular building. I don't know how the utility bills have been affected, but there is some truth to with an older building, a lot of times your energy code back when buildings were originally built wasn't near as strenuous as it is in today's standards. So obviously a new facade or a newer building is going to have a lot of those efficiencies or a better exterior than what you have in this particular building. Just insulation, vapor barriers, all of those things do play a factor in just the weather tightness of the building. And I wouldn't be surprised, but I can't specifically speak to the differences in the buildings from what this building had before to what it has now.
Well, and we know that the single pane of the windows is another part of that with energy efficiency. So I know those are some things that we could definitely be looking at in the future with the new building. It's actually, it is out throughout this whole area in the back. So we have looked into that with the horizontal, and I can make sure that, do you want to answer it?
Sure, yeah.
As the expert?
So the question is, geothermal field is on what direction am I going? South side of this building. It is currently in the proposed area where this future building would or / addition would be. And the question is, how does that affect construction? Great question. With a horizontal geothermal system, generally, and I think this is the case on this one, you put it at 3 different depths in the ground: 15 foot, 30 foot, and 45 foot. A lot of times or in general, your foundations usually don't go any more than 4 foot deep in the ground. If you got poor soil conditions, sometimes you have to over excavate underneath those foundations. So you might get a little bit deeper. You might get to maybe 6 foot or 7 foot if you have really bad conditions. That's still quite a ways above your very top loop that you have in the ground. So we're not concerned with building over top of it. And in fact, we're going to be a part of a project that's going on in Keokuk, where they're going to be building a performing arts center on top of a horizontal geothermal system, exactly like what we're looking at here on this project. So it's not a huge concern. Now, there is a different type of geothermal system where you've got vertical wells. A vertical well field is different than a horizontal well field because you've got 300 foot deep wells that are just straight vertical, where there's a lot of connections that are high just below the surface of your finished grade. that would be a concern, but this is a horizontal system, completely different. And there are some things that we're gonna have to take into consideration, but it should not be an issue. In that case, you're probably just gonna have to close that loop, close that circuit, and address it outside in a different area. There's not really good ways of addressing that system in general, but you're right. Especially if there's a building on top of it, it's gonna be difficult. But again, like we were saying, it's very deep into the ground, so we're not concerned about the force of the building exerting enough pressure on that line to collapse it. But that is a good question.
How do you guys construct on top of this?
So a lot of times you are putting the geothermal field underneath an existing building. So most of the time you're not generally building on top of it, but a lot of times you do bore underneath existing. But I personally haven't been a part of a project that has built on top of an existing, but we are about to do it down in Keokuk for the Performing Arts Center. This is not something that's overly rare, I should say. But again, you got to take precautions. Just you have to know that that's there, and you know, if the geotechnical engineer or your mechanical engineer has concerns, you address it at that time. Like I'm saying, one of the things is you've got at least another 7 foot above the very top loop that you've got before you get into any of your earthwork concerns.
Is that something you guys would guarantee as part of the project?
Guarantee that it wouldn't be damaged?
Right.
That's obviously something that we would have to do. Yeah, I mean, it's something that you have to evaluate. You've got to be going through the steps to make sure, all right, we have to make sure that we're not going to be damaging this line. And obviously, you're going to have to be running tests to ensure that you haven't damaged the line. You don't want to build the whole building and then all of a sudden realize, oh, we got an issue now. And now it's just too late to even address it. Obviously, the time that you're going to want to take a look at that is after you've done foundations. Is there something that you've done to the loop after you've dug down deep, you've poured some concrete over top of that, and you're backfilling? You got to test it then, right? Or you got to do some sort of measure to ensure that it's still functional. And then as you're going with the building, as you're erecting it, you're exerting more loads onto those foundations. Obviously, a plethora of things can happen, right? You just have to make sure, in general, issues arise in construction. It's not necessarily what the issue is, it's how you address it. And you know that we will do our part in addressing that matter if it arises. So the question is, has there been any soil testing done so far to see if, just in general, what kind of soil conditions are we working with? Sorry.
What kind of soil are you dealing with?
Correct. And no, there has not. What's that?
Soil does move.
Right. No. So the question is, has there been any soil borings or any soil testing done at this time to look into what the conditions of the site are? And the answer is no, we have not. That is something that once you get released on the project, that is one of the early things that we do is we hire a geotechnical engineer to do those soil borings in the areas that we are planning to build.
I have a question. I was wanting to hear at this meeting tonight and in the newspaper, because you keep referring to the website, the school website. There are part of the residents of Fairfield that either don't have computers or not computer savvy. So what I've been looking to hear, either tonight or in the newspaper, how much is it going to cost to fix the existing building, this existing building? You mentioned $6 million to fix the foundation work. What about the roof? I mean, you know, there has to be something that could be made on the roof, something done there that you don't have to spend $500,000 over 5 years with technology. I could be wrong. And number two, you mentioned $34 million. How do we know that's going to encompass everything? The new construction, it sounds like we don't even have, what I'm picking up, the building hasn't been designed yet, totally. It's going to cost to remove this building here, plus the air conditioning, plus moving the tennis courts. I didn't realize tennis courts are that bad. I walk past them quite frequently. So how do we know that the $34 million is going to encompass or take care of all these costs, building costs? Or you may run into trouble with the soil samples, and that may cost you another $500,000 that you're not anticipating. And we haven't even had, sounds like we don't, I haven't looked at the school websites, but what's the projected cost of just the building itself? What's the cost of removing this existing building? What's the cost of just fixing what's here? I think that's where you're going to convince people that are on the fence. It's going to cost $25 million to fix this up to where you don't have problems versus your $34 million. So I think that's what needs to be addressed, either in the meetings or at least in the newspaper for the people that don't have the ability to access the routes.
Okay, that was an awful lot. Let me try to summarize. So on our website, wanting some information on what it would take to renovate this building and then break down what the costing would be for all the different buildings. Is that kind of in a nutshell?
No, what would be the cost? Let's say it was $20 million to fix this building, or you don't have this issue.
To renovate.
$6 million to do the foundation work. What's the additional cost? You're going to replace windows. You're going to fix the roof. For example.
Sure.
So that would be nice to know. It's going to cost this much. And how long is this, the renovations going to last? What's the life expectancy?
Okay. So life expectancy of a new building about 40, 60 years. Is that where they're at?
Seems like generally it's 60 years
60.
is the general life
And
expectancy.
that's about where we're at with this building. The high school was what, 80? At least 80 years old. Fence is a lot older than that. And you're saying those are in pretty good condition, and we renovated them.
Correct. So those have been renovated. The Pence was one that we fixed some things that are within it, but structurally it was better. This building structurally has a lot of water infiltration that has really caused damage to the building, that has made it a part that it is the building that needs the most attention. Along with fixing the building, we could continue to put money into it. We know just the roofing along with the outside work would be that $6 million to fix everything, to put that up to site. We'd still have a building that's old. This building is made with concrete walls and concrete ceilings, and so if we wanted to have a learning environment for our kids of what we want for the future, that costing would be an extra amount. And I don't know if Andrew from the architect part, you want to address some of that?
We'll get both of you up here.
Sure. So, very early in the process, when we were thinking through all of these options, one of the very first options that we did explore was what would it cost to renovate, and we have the full facility assessment report and how much it would cost to make all of those fixes. So if you look in that document, to renovate Hanks, Washington, and the middle school, all the fixes in the facility report, as well as your curriculum and your capacity goals. That cost was $32 million for those 3 schools. And so in addition to those, we looked at what if we made those fixes as well as small additions, and the cost quickly escalated. And then we looked at, well, what if we did a 4 through 8 facility? And so that alleviated some of the burden that's going on with capacity issues in the elementary school, in addition to the brand new 4 through 8 facility. So you're getting your educational goals at this campus. And so renovate 3 schools for $32 million was one option, or build this school for $34 million. And we sort of explained that process in those packets.
So out of that $32 million, how much was the middle school? You know,
I don't know off the top of my head. That's something I can check my notes here real quick and get back to you on. But I wanted to make sure that we're answering, because there was a lot of questions there, and I wanted to make sure that we're capturing everything that you had. In general, you were asking, how do we know that the numbers that we have are taking care of all the problems, and how do we know that the new number is the accurate number? And all in all, one of the last questions is, how are you planning for the unforeseen, right? That is a good question, right? And that's something that's incredibly difficult to do, as you could probably guess. But we have spent a lot of time analyzing these options and working with CNBA. Well, I'm with Carly Nelson, sorry if I didn't mention that earlier. So we had done a lot of time working on the budgets and coming up with the numbers based on historical cost data and help from contractors that we work with in the area, or just, even back in the Burlington area. So we spent a lot of time evaluating each option, and as Andrew had mentioned before, we started off with 4 options, or actually there might have been a 5th one, but 4 options that we went deep into, narrowed it down to 2 options, and now we've narrowed it down to this option. And all that is, we came to those conclusions on what are we getting for our money on each of these, and at the end of it, we came to this decision because you're getting the most bang for your buck, essentially. I guess I don't know if you want to elaborate on that anymore, but the problem with an old tired building, as Dr. Nolan keeps referring to, is that you're spending a lot of money on things that doesn't improve the value of the education of your students. So it's just, you're kind of chasing around a lot of issues, putting band-aids on issues without even impacting the kids yet. And that's kind of a big part of the reason to go with the new building.
And eventually we would still have to build the building and move down the future. One of the things that you said, I do want to correct, part of this bond is not tearing down this building. That cannot be part of a GO bond. And so that would have to come out of the money that we have within our budget, within our capital project money. So that part is not part of it. So what's in this one is building a new building, the air conditioning at the high school, and the relocation of the tennis courts within that.
so what would, do you have an estimate what it would cost to build this building? Yeah,
It's like about $655,000.
It was, yeah. The question was, what's the cost to demo this building? And we are estimating it was around, I think, $660,000 is the ballpark that we have for that.
And that would be about the air conditioning. Hold on, I'm going to go to Chloe first.
I just have this question in terms of what you're asking, sir. So in terms of $32 million being used to renovate, compared to 34 for the entire project, if you were to just renovate the buildings that are existing, what is the lifespan that we could expect? Because it would seem to me if we're making buildings, if we're building new buildings, and have a 60-year span compared to renovating old buildings, are we going to expect to see 60 years of that for spending $32 million? That doesn't make sense to me. So, I mean, is that, am I trying to?
So Chloe's question is that if we spend the $32 million and we fixed all of the buildings, how long would the life expectancy and span of those buildings be by doing that project? Is that a good summary? And so, if we would still have to eventually fix new buildings and have new buildings out there. So the longevity of that would be however long that those renovations or fixes would be a part of that. And again, we know that you still have the building without the active and running space. So,
Obviously, these numbers are like pretty big numbers. I mean, are you guys looking at several organizations coming up with these numbers, or are you just looking specifically at Carl Nelson to come up with these bids? I mean, obviously, I think they're a great company, but obviously, if you have to give you bills and taxpayers, we have to have all scenarios. So we look for an organization.
there is a bidding process that will be part of that. So again, it would be within that, we have to go look at those projects. They would have a little bit of an edge because they have been a part of a lot of these things, so they know a little bit more of what we are needing. But we would definitely put out an RFP on that part of it, and we have a bidding process so that we would make sure that we are getting what we need.
Now, when you guys come up with $6 million number for the basic competitors, is that just Carl Nelson's numbers?
That is what they were looking at. And with all the projects that they do, that's their job. You know, so they can go around and you could probably have another one come in and get the same thing and say, what would it cost to renovate or fix the outside of the building and fix some of the leaks and put a new roof on everything, put new tile and drain tile around the outside, put new windows in the building. Tell us what that would cost. Fix some of the bricks that we know that the leaking is happening within the walls of the brick. Tell us what it would be to basically redo that part of it. And it would still be a lot. Tim?
You mentioned before we picked these, there was 3 other groups. So this wasn't, we just did go straight to them. We can always, we got seconds of groups that's what needs to occur.
When we started the project, so Tim's question is there was more than one that we looked at to begin this part of the facility study. So we had narrowed it down to 3. We put out the RFP. We had some people that said we would have liked to put a bid, but they didn't have a partner. We wanted to make sure that we had that team and partnership, so they couldn't put in a bid at that time. There are organizations that are still very interested in putting in a bid on the next part of the project that have come forward. But we've got 3 different companies that had the partners that we were wanting to have 2, an architect and a construction manager. And then we had each one of them come through meetings and we interviewed each one of those different organizations. And then through that, then the board selected these 2 together as the company that we would go with. Did we answer? You had another question, right?
No, my whole point is, it seems like we're directing people to the website. I think the events that people are setting on the fence or they made up their mind more than they want to, because Fairfield had over the years presented bond issues for new buildings, and in most cases, they've been turned down. I'm just pointing out, I think you should provide this information in the newspaper and through your meetings, which were you're answering these questions. But that's my point, is you need to get a little bit more of this information. Why it's best we build a new building, because it's going to cost us X amount of dollars. 3 buildings, 32 million. We haven't specified how much the middle school is. But let's say the middle school is 20 million or 25 million, and the life expectancy is another 20 years, where you build a new building, and hopefully it's more than 60 years. Because you're not even 60 years here, the fence is older than the high school. So that's my point.
Right. So to get the information out on the renovation costs and make sure that we get that on the website.
Yeah, and I think it's just general information. For example, here again, we find out the 34 million. How much is the building itself going to cost? It's going to be the whole.
Right.
Because the air conditioning is very expensive at the high school, and you estimate it right in the 1,000. Well, maybe it's more than that to build a new place.
Right, so part of the questions are maybe to show the differences of the 3 different parts of the project. And we know that the tennis courts were estimating, and I talked with Melanie Carlson at our city management meeting, and I said, well, we estimated it was like 1.2 million for the tennis courts. And so she started figuring out, she goes, cost of concrete with the lighting, with the fencing. She said, yeah, concrete alone is like $750,000 for what we're looking at. So she said, yep, about 1.2 million would be right where it should be for a new tennis court. When we talk about the air conditioning for the high school, we've kind of looked at that as an estimated about 650,000 for that as well. So, and then that would be the rest then for this building. And with other things, you know, we have some funds that are within our capital project. If there would be a little bit, not a lot, we don't have a lot in that. We use that money to fix our other buildings and roofing and the other parts of it. So we do have those broken down in that part of it that way that we know. But again, it's ballpark. And we don't have things designed yet purposely because we know that that's an extra cost. So we don't want to put the energy and funds into having a building designed if there isn't a chance that this does not pass. So we would do that part on the other side of it. And we want to make sure that we're getting more opportunities of people to have input in what they're wanting in those buildings. I know there's teachers that are saying, well, I want to make sure that we have this setting for the kids and we are able to do those things. So we would definitely get more input on that next phase. Yeah.
The proposed 4 through 8, is that a one-story building?
Yes, so the question is it a one-story building, what we would build? And yes, it would be a one-story building.
And is it gonna have a flat roof?
Well, we know that with technology, with things changing with construction, there is some slopes to things, and I can pass it on for sure.
Well, in general, I think you gotta define exactly what a flat roof actually means. Many roofs on schools are considered quote unquote flat roof, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's perfectly flat. You put in what's called tapered insulation to direct the water flow to either roof drains that discharge it out of the building, or you direct it to scuppers, which I think this building's got scuppers if I recall, to where it discharges it off the side of the building, basically usually into a downspout and onto the ground. But flat roofs are definitely the more economical way of going about it. It gets you your R value and your insulation. It satisfies your energy codes very well, but the tapered insulation is how you redirect a lot of that water to take care of your stormwater issues on your roof. I assume that's what part of the concern is flat roofs don't necessarily discharge.
Yeah, we that have lived in this neighborhood have watched the new roof or roof repair on this building year after year after year. Now, I don't know how much we've spent totally on just the roof, but I mean, they're up there just, it seems like every year. I would hope in the new one, we will not see them there.
Correct.
The architect to make sure that that doesn't happen. Just so
That's right, Andrew.
Just so it doesn't look pretty, we want it functional,
Yeah.
so it really works.
Absolutely. So there are some of your older roofs that may be truly flat, but the new roofs that you see today are not built to where it's perfectly flat. Like I said, they put in those slopes, they put in that tapered insulation for that reason, because if water sits on your roof, if you got 3 inches of water on your roof, it's going to find your weak points and it's just going to blow those, out of proportion, right? So new roofs, you do not see perfectly flat roofs. They've got tapered insulation to redirect a lot of that water. And your roof span, or oftentimes I think the roof warranties are like 20-year roof warranties on new roofs, on EPDM, TPO. So, if there are issues, it's going to be taken care of and it shouldn't come out of the taxpayers' dollars.
What's our projected enrollment, let's say, for 20 years? I mean, is anybody guessing, you said we're up 6 students, how many total students do we have?
We have about 1,600 is what we kind of average on our students. And we look at dropping students, Southeast Iowa, Northwest Iowa. They all, our actuaries will say, look at about 10 student drop over time. And if you would look at ours from 20 years ago to now, you can see that slope is there. We know that we are on a stable line right now. We might lose a few, we gain a few, but it's a stable enrollment that we have had for the past few years. We also know that there's changes in things. We know that around the I-80 belt and up through the Iowa City Cedar Rapids area, that the students they cannot build a building fast enough to get all the students that are there and all the people that are in those areas. We're also seeing that there is a small trend that's starting to change because of the connectivity, that people are moving to areas because they want to be closer to family, different areas, and they're able to have their job as an online version. We have some friends that one works for Boeing and they moved from Arizona. They both, husband and wife, work online. He works for Boeing. She works for a company out of Chicago for marketing, and they live right here in Southeast Iowa so that they can be close to family. At the Friday Fest a month or two ago, I met a family that had moved here and said, "Oh, what brought you to Fairfield?" Well, we just thought, we looked a lot of places around. We both work online. We decided this would be a great place to live and to have the open and the fresh air for families. So we wanted to be here in this area. So I do see that some of that can happen. Now, does that impact our enrollment? It may not, but what would impact our enrollment is if we had more companies that would come into the area, and when businesses come around and look at our buildings, a lot of them aren't going to build here because they look at what we put and invest in our school, in our kids, for what their future employers will be. So it's this whole circle that we need to look at that makes a difference for Fairfield and for what we need to do to strive for the economic development of our Fairfield area. Yes.
So I went to the website and I was looking at the pages, and one of the things it said was we need facility quality, and we're missing educational opportunities, and we want more community pride. Those were the three bullet points. Could you expand upon what educational opportunities we might be missing out on, just so we understand specifically what you guys are saying?
Okay, so you're looking at the slide that talks about what we need with the 21st century learning and the educational opportunities for kids. Part of that is flexibility in ways that we can group our kids together. We can put them in a setting so that they could move from room to room. If we needed to have places with the flexibility of walls that we need to change things, if there's something in the future that we need to do to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the kids as they move forward in the future, we would set the building plan so that we have that flexibility and opportunity for kids. And educational opportunities go along with making sure that we have it set up so that we have enough of the technology available for our kids, that we have the internet ability that would go in easier for the kids and make it an opportunity of learning that we need for the kids today and for the future, and get it primed so that it's there set for the future. Did that not answer it? No. Not at all. Okay.
So, just more specific, like what are we missing here that's going to be new in the new building, other than pods? I heard that.
Yeah.
Understanding and expanding, the cohorts. But other than that, like, Fairfield's very progressive. We always do a good job of getting great facilities. There's so many examples of it. So I'm just trying to understand. So people that are voting on this, like, what's the vision?
Sure. So part of that vision, so what's the vision for the education? We want to make sure that the spaces are large enough so that they can have that. If you're doing the hands-on learning for kids, you need space that you can store the equipment that goes along with that. You need space for the kids to be able to put things out, to be able to be in bigger groups. So you need larger rooms than what we have. We're no longer just with the rows of students in the rows and the teacher in front of the classroom. We want our teacher to be working with the groups of kids in several different groups. If we have them all running on top of each other in small classrooms, it's very difficult for the kids to then have those opportunities to work together in a small group. It gets too loud. We can expand them, have them in several places within that space, so we have the room to have the hands-on learning and the equipment and different skills that they need to make sure that they're working as a team. Those are things that we need in a space that we have too small of classrooms for the most part. most of the classrooms here are very small. That makes it difficult for our kids to have a tangled environment. The rows are good. If you walk, and we have it set where we can walk into some of the rooms that if we have it set with 25 kids in the room, sometimes that can get too small, and we're trying to do pods or changing the classrooms into groupings. It makes it very difficult for that learning environment. Did that help?
Somewhat, I mean, so what I heard, not to be, is we need larger rooms
We do.
to account for,
We need larger rooms. Yes.
I mean, taking out walls is very difficult.
These, and I'm going to turn that over to Andrew on the walls.
So we did look at, that was part of that $32 million estimate too. We looked at options where moving walls, and that's obviously the price continues to increase. But to your point, as far as our design methodologies on how schools are being designed differently or what students are getting now that aren't a part of this school, we break it down into 4 learning methodologies, and we did a survey with the entire staff on all levels, how they would best use their time. And it's almost an equal representation of direct instruction, small group and collaboration, exploration, and hands-on learning. And to supplement that chart, we broke down how this space is set up, or how the educational spaces are set up right now. And so I think in this facility, it was 97% of your total square footage was dedicated to just the direct instruction methodology. That's not to say that those other activities aren't happening, but they're happening in spaces where it wasn't necessarily their intention and they can't happen simultaneously or anything. And so as far as design goes, we're trying to get spaces for those methodologies specifically designed for them to happen so that they can happen simultaneously and students can be in the right position and students can use the methodology that they would like when they would like to use it. Does that
help more?
More? Okay.
I think also you can expand on what it would take to move walls. Specifically, all of the walls in there are very expensive. It's not necessarily.
That is a great question. So the question was, what does it actually take to remove a wall, to expand a classroom, to get the square footage in these classrooms that we believe that we need to satisfy what we're trying to get out of these classrooms, right? So in this particular building, I mean, this building, I won't lie, the structure of it is built well. It's there. I mean, it is solid. And that's just the way construction was back in the past, as they overdid the materials. They put a lot of concrete into buildings that over the years, you start to realize that you don't necessarily need all of that to have a building that stands and serves its life cycle. So over the years, you kind of swap some of those materials out for more steel rather than concrete. So in this particular building, and I know at least this older wing over here, you have a lot of load-bearing walls, which are walls that are holding up the structure that's above it. So if you knock out a load-bearing wall, you have to put something else there to carry that load that it was carrying before. So to simply knock out a wall, it sounds easy and might be fun to do with a sledgehammer, but you got to take some precautions to put up another couple of columns, throw in another beam before that wall can be fully demoed, or else your whole building's going to collapse. So you do have to strategize. That's not the case everywhere. Every single wall in this building is not a load-bearing wall, but there are a lot of them. And then, again, you're kind of constrained to, well, if your room isn't as deep as what it needs to be, then you have to go wider, right? So then you got some awkward shaped classrooms that may not be as fitting for the current learning environment as you could if you had a green field and you were able to build these rooms in whatever dimensions and configurations that you wanted. So yes, expanding classrooms by removing walls does work, but it's not as simple as what it sounds, I guess, at the end of the day. Especially in the building that we've got now, because a lot of those are load-bearing walls. Not all of them, but a lot of them are, to where you've got to take a lot of extra precautions, and you have to pay for a lot of other support members that you wanted if you were just building new.
Chloe has a question.
So earlier you talked about the geothermal field and about whether it was efficient in this building. And my understanding is that we retrofit something with the geothermal, I think my mask off, it's like a yellow water. So you were talking about the geothermal and whether this building was running efficiently with it. And my understanding is when you retrofit something, like a building like this, with something like geothermal, it's going to be hard to get it to be efficient if you're not doing it like from the very beginning, making it with the fields and with the building. You can still make it probably pretty good, make it work for the building. I feel like it's the same way with education, right? Because in terms of classrooms and the way that these classroom spaces were made, when these buildings were built, I mean, there's closets and hooks, and there's shelves, and we don't really have that kind of educational system anymore. I'm looking behind me and I'm seeing this theater B. I don't know if you've been in a classroom recently, Alex, but that's like a big thing that we use. It's this theater B. Teachers implement it in different ways throughout their classroom. And they probably want to use different types of methodology in certain terms of teaching to implement those things, whether it be through different equipment or different materials. And that's really up to the teacher and sort of like the way that they're going to be utilizing their space. If they don't have that option, if they're just have a room that's big enough to hold desks and chairs and just that sort of thing, and there's not enough spaces to implement that. I mean, like, it's hard. I feel sort of like the teachers, the students, these fine folks are trying really hard to find a way to accommodate the future of our children and to do so in the most efficient and most financially sound way. And it's understandable to me that there are, concerns about how much money that they're spending and how much money they're going to spend, and there probably aren't any guarantees. But at the same time, there's no guarantees that retrofitting things, the buildings that we currently have, are going to do any better. I mean, that's just my way of thinking about it in terms of like spaces and ways that we use it. I'm just trying to accommodate.
I don't think I could recap that. I should.
I didn't really have a question, I just feel like I wanted to address that idea of space, because I feel like there's so many examples all around us in this building. I mean, I'm looking at this, and there's like all these stains on the wall from the water pouring.
Wow.
And, I'm seeing like leader in me, and it seems obvious to me that there is like a good plan in place. And I know that there's people who are concerned about it, but I also think that, these are hard questions you're asking from the people who are like architects. You're asking them specifically about what is the space, why do they need, why do the teachers need more space?
Well, that's why I'm here, is to educate myself on it. I'm not attacking it.
Oh, no.
I mean, I just really don't understand. You're right, I have not been in
Yeah.
the classroom to do my learning. I do most of my learning online. So, for me to understand the space and what we're changing, that's why I'm here, to educate myself. I'm not against it. I've been one of the largest supporters for everything we do. So, I just don't understand. And I think that by asking that question in this situation, it's the, everybody else that, it's hard to encapsulate what you just said and what they said on a webpage or in the newspaper. I mean, us dynamically talking about this.
That's the reason why these events are here, right? The opportunity, what you said was very well said. I mean, that was great, but I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but one of the things that she said is, it's really difficult to retrofit an area to meet the needs that you have now. I could look at this space, and I didn't think of it until while she was talking, but what if this space didn't satisfy one of the activities that you needed for, I have no idea what that would be. What if your theater became a much bigger deal in 10 years than it is now, and say you needed that wall to move 20 foot that way? That would be really difficult. But you might be able to make projections now with the newer building to say, nope, we absolutely got to have more space for our theater students in the future. And And that's the opportunity that you have with the newer buildings to identify some of those needs that you didn't have back in the 60s when this building was built, but you have them now, and it's much easier to act on those things than with the newer building. And I'm not saying that a brand new building is the solution to all the needs every single time. That's simply not the case, but we think it is here.
What is the average class size? Do you have like 30 students, 20 students, 25 students?
They range from, we have some that are specialized classrooms that have smaller groups of kids. Then the top end is right around 25, 27 kids in the classroom at the middle school.
See, I went to the school back in the 60s, and 70s actually. So I received a very good education. We had 30-some kids in the grade. So the place that we're trying to bring up is questions I think a lot of the residents here have. And I think they just need to be, the information needs to get out a little bit more than just the website. You know, these discussions here, the newspapers and other sources. So that's my whole thing. I'm not attacking anybody, but there's questions that people have, and how do you vote on something that's going to cost $34 million if you really don't have all the information? And like I said, there's some people that aren't computer savvy, so just relying on the website isn't the only means to get the information.
Sure. And Andy has done some articles for the newspapers, and
But it's not the questions.
it's not those questions. So we can get an article.
Really gone out. I never see, and I read the newspaper, so I haven't seen where it's gonna cost this much to renovate this. Well, you know, and specifics, like I mentioned before, it's gonna cost. I already mentioned it before, so I don't have to go over it. I think if you get that information out, then people can make informed decisions. And you're going to sell the $34 million to more people that way than just, you know, ask people to say, look on the website.
Sure. And I do know that people don't all have the internet, so they do need to have others. There will be a flyer that should be hitting your doorstep within the next week, but a lot of it is the same information that you have here. It does not have the costing of the different buildings in that as it was there. So that would be something that if we can get that pulled together with our team and get some information for the website or for the community page. Do you have a question?
I was just more of a comment. One thing I was going to say is, you know, I came back to the media and I was 3 members of the media here, so I was just really disappointed. So the last 3 days, every single person I talked to, we got asked one thing. So, but anyways, I mean, personally myself, I would really like to see this school. I think it's needed. I think right now there's a huge disconnect right now between what the plans are and how it's being made to the community. The reason I say that is you guys have done a terrific job. But every single person I've talked to last several days, they don't understand why we're doing it and things like that. We're just trying to curate all these issues like this, throwing massive amounts of money at it, you know? And I guess to me, I feel like this is really rushed. You know, we have 2 weeks to make this decision. You know, I feel like we're gonna have a lot of uninformed voters go to the booth, and honestly, that probably get voted down because of that. Or something like you vote in and you don't have information. This is going to cost me a lot of money, but I would personally, I want to invest in our community. You know, I think any of us that own businesses in the community, we want to see where we'll go. I think that I can see forever. You know, that's, I've actually made a decision last day. I'm personally actually in the school board because that's how I have 3 young children in the district, and I want to keep them in this district. But I guess that's just the main point. I do feel like this is rushed. It's still 4 days ago. I know nothing about this rush. It's absolutely nothing. And yeah, I hope it goes through. I mean, it's like what the community understands about this. When I brought it to everyone, no one has the facts on why we're doing this over.
That's good feedback, so we can try to get things out and get
And on the heels of the vote that we had last spring and the lack of information and transparency around that. I mean, just
Talking about the,
last fall.
which, what was that? Oh, everything.
There was just a lack of communication surrounding that. And
Revenue purpose.
And then also, coming off of COVID, and our kids aren't in school. And, but we need a new school. I think that there's just a lot of uneasiness surrounding all of that, and that can just be addressed. And that's it.
Is there a reason you guys didn't know about anything? Because there was a meeting 2 weeks ago, and last week, this week.
Well, we got came 2 days ago, it wasn't specific.
This process has been going on now 18 months.
Since, well, when we first hired everyone, it was March of 2020, or April of 2020.
Community groups got together prior to COVID.
Correct. We had,
Almost a year and a half.
yep. So things had started back then with some focus groups, different people in the community. School administrators were part of some of those teams. Different community members helped to build to the point where we were today, that it is a building. So there has been community input from different people at different levels. We tried to make sure that we had cross-sector of different individuals. We had Farm Bureau that was part of it. Actually, there was 2 Farm Bureau members that were on the focus groups from the get-go. We had different business people that came to some meetings that we made more decisions on, focusing what we were doing here in the library. That was during COVID, but it was at the end of having service. So there has been a lot, and maybe that's part of the newspaper. We don't read the newspaper, or we don't think that at our homes, that some of that isn't getting in there. And we can talk to Andy about more articles and get things out there. So does anybody want to go look at the building?
Yeah.
Let's go.
It's still being recorded.
So when I started, when I was in this school, there was trash cans all over this place in this building.
I had the people that moved into this building, when they said, hey, I was in the 8th grade class that moved into this building. It leaked when I moved in and when I was a part of it. And I know when I came to open houses here in 2014 even, there was trash cans all over that had the leaking of the buildings and the roofs. So we had that too. But we're gonna look at some of the water damage that's even in the front office.